What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. We got a very exciting episode today, man. We're going to be previewing the upcoming NFL Hall of Fame game featuring the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. Players to watch, key storylines that you need to keep up with going into that matchup. We're going to be providing NFL training camp updates, checking in on the rookie quarterbacks Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. How are they performing so far throughout training camp? Minnesota Vikings outlook for the 2023 NFL season. How good are the Minnesota Vikings going to be? And the last thing that we're going to be discussing on today's episode is, will Florida Gators fans turn on Billy Naiper if this season goes as bad as expected? Before we get into it, if you're new and you haven't already, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We're not just available on YouTube. You can find the audio version of the podcast available on all podcasting platforms. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode of today's episode, rate us 5 stars. Apple, Spotify. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews before the season starts. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, JT Sports Podcast, or you can go down to the description down below. Click the Apple or Spotify links. It will take you directly to whichever podcasting platform you want to use. So rate us 5 stars. We will greatly appreciate it. NFL Hall of Fame game preview 2023. We got the New York Jets taking on the Cleveland Browns. And no, Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson are not going to be playing in this game, but this is going to be the game that kicks off the start of the 2023 NFL preseason slate. And even though we're not going to see a lot of the starters playing in this game, there are a lot of storylines and key players that you guys need to keep your eyes out for. And that's what we're going to be discussing in this preview. Let's start off with the biggest storylines for the New York Jets heading into the Hall of Fame game. First of all, yes, we know that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the guy at QB this season for New York, but what about Zach Wilson? Is he still the future at quarterback for the New York Jets? Hopefully, with Aaron Rodgers starting a couple of seasons for New York, that would give Zach Wilson more time to develop. Because you got to remember that the Jets did select him really high not too long ago in the draft. So hopefully he improves enough for when Aaron Rodgers retires, he can take back over the reins at QB. So you want to see how Zach Wilson looks and how he performs against the Browns in this game. Yes, it is the preseason. You're not going to be seeing these guys playing at full speed if they are starters, but this is a good measuring stick to see how improved Zach Wilson is right now from where he was a year ago. And the preseason is a good tool to evaluate guys like Zach Wilson. If he struggles in this game and throughout the majority of the preseason, then that probably is a good indicator that he's not taking too many strides in his improvement. He's not really developing. So Zach Wilson, how he plays in this game, definitely going to have my eyes on that. The offensive line concerns for the New York Jets have been well documented this offseason. A lot of people in the national media keep harping on this offensive line. And of course, we're going to see how the offensive line does in this game against the Cleveland Browns, who have some issues on the defensive line in their own rights. There are 2 offensive linemen in particular that if you're a Jets fan, you need to watch in this game. Rookie center out of Wisconsin, Joe Tippmann. He was considered either the best or second best center coming out of this past year's draft. And the reason why you need to keep your eyes on him is because when you think about some of the best offensive lines in the NFL, they all have great centers. Kansas City, Philadelphia Eagles, they got Jason Kelce. So if you have a good offensive line, the majority of the times, you're going to have a great center. And the New York Jets haven't had one of those since Nick Mangold. So Joe Tippmann, if he can end up being that next good rookie center for the New York Jets, or the next great rookie center for the New York Jets this season, like how Nick Mangold was his rookie season, then this is going to be a really good offensive line. And Joe Tippmann is somebody who many draft analysts expect to have a really long career. Some people think he can be a 10-year starter in this league. And you remember how long Nick Mangold played for the New York Jets at center. So hopefully Joe Tippmann can give you that kind of production, and we're going to get a good understanding of where he is as far as him being a day one starter in this game, because he's in the battle to be the starting center for the Jets with Connor McGovern, who's a veteran in this league. He started a good amount of the games over the last couple of years for the Jets in the past. So we're going to see how good Joe Tippmann's going to look in this matchup. And then the last thing you need to keep your eyes out on for the New York Jets are their backup running back spots. Now, right now, they're flirting with signing Dalvin Cook. And even if they do sign Dalvin Cook, you still need to keep your eyes on this, because you want to know who's going to be that third running back behind Dalvin Cook if he gets signed, and Breece Hall when he gets back fully healthy. And they got a lot of good running backs on the roster. Michael Carter, Zonovan Knight. You also got rookie out of Pittsburgh, Israel Abandokonda. I think I said that right. Abandokonda. Yeah, Israel Abandokonda. And he was one of my favorite running backs coming out of this past year's draft. Very explosive, has very good acceleration for his size. He's a bowling ball when he gets into the open field. So I expect to see a lot of him in this game. And normally the run game isn't really good in the Hall of Fame game, because you don't really get good offensive line play. So even if the offensive line doesn't play great as a whole, if you're a New York Jets fan, you need to just pay attention to the individual player on the offensive line and not the overall performance as a whole, because it's normally a crapshoot when you look at offensive line play in the preseason overall. You just got a bunch of moving pieces there, a bunch of guys who got no timing, no chemistry, mix and match lineups. Just pay more attention to the players on the offensive line who you have the most interest in. Joe Tippmann and Mekhi Becton, who we also got to touch on too. But at running back, you got Israel Abandokonda, rookie out of Pittsburgh. I think he probably is going to be the one who runs away with that RB3 spot behind Dalvin and Breece Hall. But Michael Carter is a guy who I'm not really sleeping on as well. Also, we got Travis Dye out of USC. I had a pretty high grade on him. I had a 5th round grade on him. He has very good vision, very shifty. He doesn't have top speed, but he does have pretty good acceleration. And he's a tough running back overall. Anything you want him to do, he's going to contribute on special teams. I think he's a pretty willing blocker as well. So keep your eyes out on Travis Dye, Israel Abandokonda, the rookie running backs that they have, along with Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. And you need to look out for Mekhi Becton. I would be doing Jets fans a disservice if I didn't talk about him, but I mentioned Joe Tippmann. Mekhi Becton, people label him a bust, but I don't think he's a bust because of him being unable to perform at a high level. When he's healthy, he's pretty good, but that's the problem with him. When he's healthy, which is something that he isn't really able to do. Well, he's not really able to stay healthy, which is something that has hindered him up to this point of his career. And that's why his career kind of is on the line, at least when it comes to him remaining with the New York Jets after this season. So he needs to stay healthy. He did lose some weight. He is in better shape now than what he used to be. But you want to see what he's going to do in this game, because this is somebody who is competing for a starting job, and he's going to get a lot of playing time in this game. So the fact that he's getting a lot of playing time in this game shows you that the coaching staff is expecting a lot out of him this year. And so far, there's a lot that they need to see. So look out for Mekhi Becton on the New York Jets offensive line. Biggest storylines for the Browns heading into this matchup: their second defensive tackle spot next to Dalvin Tomlinson. Who's going to end up taking over at that role? Now, they got a lot of interior defensive linemen who they brought in via free agency. Dalvin Tomlinson, they're paying him a lot of money, but they also have Tristan Hill, Maurice Hurst, who they signed in free agency. They drafted a rookie defensive tackle out of Baylor. Let me see if I can pronounce his name correctly. Here we go. Siaki Ika. I think I got it. Siaki Ika. He was drafted in the 3rd round out of Baylor. Doesn't really bring much to the pass rush department, but he's really phenomenal against the run. And that was the Cleveland Browns' biggest weakness on defense last year, was their lack of a run defense. So he could come in and be that good elite run stuffer that they need right out the gate. And I think he was one of the best run stuffers coming out of this past year's draft class from that interior defensive lineman position. So you need to keep your eyes out on that defensive tackle position. Also, who's stepping up at wide receiver behind Amari Cooper? Now, they got a lot of talent in the receiver room. It is not a question of, do they have talent at wide receiver? It's the question of who's going to be the most consistent players who they can look at to produce consistently on a week-to-week basis. Now, Elijah Moore, who they traded for with the New York Jets not too long ago, he's been making a lot of noise for the Browns so far throughout training camp. He's been Deshaun Watson's pretty much go-to target. So if he plays in this game, look out for Elijah Moore. You also need to keep your eyes out on Cedric Tillman, who I'm going to touch on in depth a little bit later in this. He was one of my highest rated receivers coming out of Tennessee. I felt he was better than Jalen Hyatt. He has a lot of similarities to Mike Evans. We're going to see a lot of him in this game. And the run defense, is that going to improve? Now, they hired Jim Schwartz as their new defensive coordinator. Now, you got to remember that Jim Schwartz is somebody who is highly respected in the NFL coaching world. He's a really good defensive coordinator. Everywhere he goes, the defenses normally are pretty good. And the run defense needs to improve if the Browns are going to be able to have a shot at winning the AFC North this year. Now, the run defense doesn't need to improve in the preseason. You're just trying to, get your rotations in order, trying to evaluate guys, who's going to make the roster, who's going to be put on the practice squad, who's going to be the starters. But you would like to see some improvement in that department. If the New York Jets come out in this game and they run for over 150 yards on you in the preseason, that's a huge concern. The offensive line playing the preseason is normally really bad. So anytime you give up 200 rushing yards in the preseason, it's a huge disaster, and you need to have some huge talks with your defense because some tough decisions need to be made if you're giving up that many rushing yards in the preseason. You're having so many different offensive line combinations thrown out there that it's pretty hard for chemistry to really be pretty good if you're, a backup or 3rd string, 4th string offensive lineman and you get thrown up in there. So for you to give up 200 rushing yards, that means that the offensive lineman that you're going against just dominated you. The preseason is not where you see a lot of teams rushing for a lot on the ground. You need to have good chemistry and communication on the offensive line to be effective in pass protection and run blocking. And that's why you don't really see a lot of good blocking in the preseason, because you just got a lot of guys who are just kind of thrown out there and the coaches are just rotating them at different positions. So keep your eyes on the Browns' run defense. If they get carved up in this game, I'm going to have a lot of concerns. Players to watch for the New York Jets: Jason Brownlee, undrafted rookie free agent wide receiver out of Cal. Really good size. He's 6'2", has great speed. He's been making a lot of plays throughout training camp for the New York Jets so far. I've seen him on social media a lot. He was given Sauce Gardner, the burners? Yeah, I believe it was Sauce Gardner. This dude flew past Sauce Gardner. He was giving Sauce Gardner some work in a couple of clips that I saw floating around on social media. So keep your eyes out on Jason Brownlee. This is somebody who's in the conversation to be the wide receiver 5 on this team, maybe a practice squad guy, a bubble guy to make the roster, but there's always a couple of guys who go undrafted on everybody's favorite team who people kind of gravitate towards and root to make the roster because they hope that their team found the next undrafted gem. And this is probably somebody who the Hard Knocks team is going to be following around a lot. So if you're going to be keeping up with Hard Knocks, you need to be keeping up with Jason Brownlee, undrafted rookie free agent out of Cal. Rookie center Joe Tippmann, we talked about him to start this early, but we're going to be touching on him a little bit more. He has great size, great athleticism to be a center, plays with great balance. And if the New York Jets are going to have a great offensive line this year, if Joe Tippmann ends up starting and beating out Connor McGovern, then that's a good sign if you're a Jets fan. And plus, the last time the Jets had elite center play was when they had Nick Mangold. He's been out the league for a while, and their offensive lines haven't been good since. And we look at Mekhi Becton, but Joe Tippmann is going to be the second most important player on this offensive line if he starts. If the New York Jets are going to have a good offensive line this year, it's going to start with whoever they have starting at center. I believe Joe Tippmann is going to end up beating out Connor McGovern for that starting job at center. And I think with his athleticism and how much of a mauler he is in the run game, he's going to drastically improve that New York Jets run blocking, and he also is going to be able to provide them with better play from that position than Connor McGovern. And he hasn't been bad. It's just that, you could be better there. And plus, he's getting up there in age. So I'm rooting for Joe Tippmann. I really like his game. This was somebody who I was a huge fan of when he was coming out of Wisconsin. Big, powerful, mauler in the run game. If the Jets end up starting him this year and they end up being good on the offensive line, it's probably because of how good Joe Tippmann is going to be if he starts. Tony Adams. This was somebody who went undrafted last year out of Illinois. He was able to make the roster. He appeared in 11 games. He started in one of them. And he's in the running to end up replacing LaMarcus Joyner. And there are a lot of fans who are rooting for Tony Adams because, like Jason Brownlee, undrafted guy who, everybody wants to find the next undrafted gem. So Tony Adams makes the roster. So fans, of course, if you make the roster, people are going to keep their eyes on you. And now he has a prime opportunity to maybe start at safety this year. So keep your eyes for how he plays in this game. He's going to see a lot of action. And I'm looking at their 2 young edge rushers in Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald. Now, Will McDonald was drafted in the first round, 15th overall from this past year's NFL draft out of Iowa State. I thought he was quietly overlooked a little bit because before the season started, he was projected to be a top 5, top 10 pick, and then throughout the season, he quietly just fell off of people's radars and then went back into the 1st round. So when he got drafted 15th overall, there were a good amount of people who were a little bit shocked because they thought that he was going to be a name that you was going to hear called late in the 1st round or even early 2nd. And Jermaine Johnson, he was a late 1st round pick by the New York Jets last year coming out of Florida State in 2022. And when the New York Jets drafted Jermaine Johnson late in the 1st round, there was a lot of hype around that move. There was a lot of optimism about Jermaine Johnson and what he can be for the New York Jets in the foreseeable future. But we didn't really get to see too much of him as a rookie. And in my opinion, I thought that he had the potential to be the best pass rusher coming out of last year's draft class. He probably could have been a top 10 pick, depending on, you know, how certain teams were reportedly feeling about him. So when you look at him going into this preseason matchup, I want to see if he's going to have some moments where he comes out and he flashes. He had 2.5 sacks last year, which isn't bad, but I want to see him potentially have a breakout season this year. And he has a lot of athleticism. This dude is one of the most athletically gifted edge rushers that I think has come out in the last couple of years. And he kind of has a lot of similarities in my eyes to Jalen Phillips, but way more athletic. So look out for Jermaine Johnson in this game. And one of the questions about the Cleveland Browns is their depth at offensive tackle. So if you're a Browns fan, your offensive tackle depth is definitely going to get tested in this game between Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, because both of those guys are two pass rushers who Jets fans are hoping can be their two future studs when it comes to being able to get pressure on the quarterback. Browns players to watch don't have as many as the Browns, but I'm definitely going to be looking at Cedric Tillman. I think he was an underrated route runner. He's really good after the catch. This dude in the open field is really scary. Great size, great athleticism. Reminds me a lot of Mike Evans. And some people may be a little bit scared to give Cedric Tillman that comparison when you think about how good Mike Evans has been throughout his NFL career. But if you look at Cedric Tillman, the body type, how well he is at coming down with 50-50 balls, good red zone target, but also somebody who you can ask to run all the routes in between the short intermediate sides of the field. So Cedric Tillman, this is somebody who can do it all. He's not just a great deep ball wideout who can get those contested 50-50 balls. This is also somebody who is really good in between the numbers, short, intermediate. And when you're looking at Jerome Ford, he's going to be the backup running back for the Browns this year. They got him in the 5th round in last year's draft, which I don't know how the hell he went that low, because I thought that he was arguably one of the best running backs in that draft last year. And Jerome Ford, great vision, incredible size, 5'11", 220 pounds, but even though he has good size, he moves incredibly well. Very good speed, very good acceleration, and he's really agile for his size. And I think that the reason why they were so comfortable allowing Kareem Hunt to just hit free agency was because they had Jerome Ford looming in the background. Because when they drafted him last year, I was like, damn, like, he's going to sit for this year, but they probably were going to let Kareem Hunt walk in. That's what they did, and I think Jerome Ford actually could be better. Now, he probably won't give you what Kareem Hunt gave you in the passing game, but that's what you got Demetric Felton for, to pick up what you're lacking in the passing game department from your running backs. But he's a really good running back with great vision, really good after contact. Like, I'm excited to watch Jerome Ford work in this game. A lot of you guys are kind of sleeping on Jerome Ford unless you're a Browns fan. This dude is exciting to watch. Siaki Ika, 3rd round pick out of Baylor, rookie. I think he potentially could be starting next to Dalvin Tomlinson. They do have somebody ahead of him, Jordan Elliott, I believe his name is, who started the majority of the games at that other defensive tackle spot. But I think Siaki Ika could end up outperforming him. Really good against the run. He probably doesn't give you much in the passing game when it comes to being able to get after the quarterback, but your run defense was a huge liability this year, and you don't really need him to get pressure on the quarterback. That's what Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith are for, and you can probably get a little bit of that out of Dalvin Tomlinson. I think if you can get somebody who can come in and be a good or maybe elite run stuffer right away, I think that's a win. So Siaki Ika is somebody that, if you're a Browns fan, keep an eye out on for. So these are my Cleveland Browns players to watch for the 2023 NFL Hall of Fame game. Let me know some Browns players that you guys are going to have your eyes out on for. I'm probably also going to be keeping out on DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I was a huge fan of his. Coming out of UCLA, very good arm, could be the Browns' backup quarterback. But this is my NFL Hall of Fame game preview. Let me know some things that you guys are going to be keeping your eyes out for. What are some players that you're going to be watching? We will be going live after the game, giving my thoughts, takeaways, analysis, all that good stuff. So we're going to be going live after the NFL Hall of Fame game. Make sure that you're subscribed. You got post notifications on so you don't miss it. Shout out to everybody that we got in the chat. We got my guy Marcus, Poppy Guapo TV. What's going on? Now let's move on to this. NFL training camp updates. Let's check in on the rookie quarterbacks. How are CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, and Anthony Richardson performing so far throughout training camp? I want to start with Bryce Young because he was the #1 overall pick. And there were many people who were questioning if Bryce Young was going to be able to live up to the expectations that comes with being a #1 overall pick. And from what I've seen so far from him throughout training camp and what I've read, he's been as good as advertised. As a matter of fact, he's been the best performing rookie quarterback out of all of them that have come out of his draft class. I mean, when you look at Bryce Young and the clips that have surfaced about him, you see why he went #1 over CJ Stroud. His ability to process defenses is second to none. He's one of the best rookie quarterbacks that I've ever evaluated. And I had him with a higher grade than Trevor Lawrence. His ability to process defenses is similar to playing the AI quarterback on Madden. It's like as soon as he finds one guy open, the ball's coming out. Now, he has kind of struggled a little bit with taking care of the football. He's had 3 turnovers prior to today's past practice, which he did a lot better job of taking care of the football. But it's not like he's had a bad turnover bug. He was throwing interceptions left or right, nothing like that. Just a couple of balls over the past 3 days that kind of got away from him. He performed really good on the Monday practice that the Carolina Panthers had, but the prior 3 practices kind of had some balls that got away from him, but nothing to be worried about where he had 2-3 interception days. Bryce Young, he's been as good as advertised, very accurate. His anticipation and ball placement has been on full display. That's something that a lot of Panthers fans who've been in attendance at training camp have been talking about. That's been standing out when it comes to watching Bryce Young practice. And today, at the time I'm recording this, it's the first day that all these guys that we're talking about just practice with pads on. So Bryce Young's been doing this without pads on, but it's not like the quarterbacks get hit anyway. For all you guys are like, oh, everybody looks good in shorts and tank tops and non-practice, the quarterback never gets hit anyway. So Bryce Young has looked really good. Yeah, he's had a couple of mistakes here and there, but he's been better than CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson by a landslide. And compared to those other quarterbacks, he's already earned the starting job already. Right before training camp even officially started, Frank Wright already named him the starting QB, and then it came out officially. So Bryce Young, the fact that he already has earned the starting quarterback job, beating out Andy Dalton compared to CJ Stroud, who's competing with Davis Mills, tells you everything you need to know about Bryce Young and where he is in terms of him and his rookie development. He's already the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, QB1 officially, and training camp has just gotten underway. So his accuracy, decision making has been pretty good, despite the couple of turnovers that he's given up here and there. Nothing major. CJ Stroud, on the other hand, I've been a little bit disappointed with what I've been hearing about CJ Stroud coming out. Now, he's had some really nice moments, but outside of his nice throws to Tank Dell and Noah Brown, he's kind of struggled. Now, the good thing is that if you're a Houston Texans fan, he still has been better than the other quarterbacks on your roster, Case Keenum and Davis Mills. And CJ Stroud, if you probably were to ask their head coach, D'Amico Ryans, who currently is ahead in the quarterback battle, he probably, if he was being honest, would tell you CJ Stroud. But CJ Stroud hasn't really been as good compared to Bryce Young so far up to this point in training camp. And Bryce Young went #1 overall for a reason, and we expected Bryce Young to be as good as what he has been so far. But CJ Stroud, we knew that it may have taken him a little bit to kind of get us comfortable as Bryce Young, because something that Bryce Young does incredibly well that CJ doesn't is being able to stay calm and being able to stay poised. Then CJ Stroud, throughout training camp for the Texans so far, he struggled with pressure in his face, which was a big knock that many scouts had on him when he was coming out of Ohio State. Now, he has been pretty accurate with the football, but his decision making has been really rough to start out. But that's what you expect from a rookie quarterback. It's just that, I kind of thought that CJ Stroud would be a little bit more ready to go. I didn't think that the turnover bug would kind of get him a little bit early. I kind of thought he would be as good as what Bryce Young gets to start out. I thought that he kind of would hit the ground running, similar to Bryce, but it kind of has been a little bit of a struggle. But it hasn't been struggles that's been so bad that he hasn't really separated himself from Davis Mills. If the Texans were to start week 1 of the NFL season today, they would be throwing CJ Stroud out there. He's been better than Davis Mills. So although he struggled, most of the Houston Texans quarterbacks have struggled up to this point in training camp. And the offense, you've seen these receivers look really good on social media, but I'm really interested for the people who've been in attendance of the Houston Texans training camp sessions. Are these receivers getting consistent separation? Like, are these quarterbacks just overthrowing these wide receivers, making these receivers look bad, or are these wide receivers struggling to make these quarterbacks look good? I'm eager to see what the full situation is down there in Houston. But CJ Stroud has struggled, but I expect him to improve as we progress throughout training camp and the preseason. I think one thing that stands out about CJ Stroud the most is his ball placement and accuracy, and that's something that's been praised the most about him so far throughout training camp and OTAs and minicamp, is how well he's able to put the ball on these wide receivers right in their hands, and how he's able to put the ball in great places where the defenders can't make a play on it. But he also has had a couple of throws that made you go, damn, why would you throw that? And then Derek Stingley earlier today had a pick 6 on CJ Stroud. So it's kind of been more of an up and down rookie camp so far for CJ Stroud. Anthony Richardson, when it comes to AR, he hasn't thrown the football as much as Bryce Young and CJ Stroud have. He also just got surgery on his nose, so he missed Monday's training camp session for Indianapolis, but he is expected to return within the next couple of days. The latest he's expected to miss is Thursday's training camp session, so he should be back in action pretty shortly. And even though he hasn't thrown a lot, there's been a lot of reports about Anthony Richardson where he kind of has been what you've expected, but a little bit better than what you expected. His accuracy has been hit or miss at times, but it hasn't been as bad as what initially people thought when he was coming out of Florida. Now, his footwork is improving. His decision-making is improving. All that is a work in progress. All those things have been mentioned when it comes to how he's performed so far in training camp for Indy. He's had a lot of highlight reel moments, i.e. the 50-50 or the 50-55-yard touchdown bomb to Alex Pierce that everybody was going crazy over on social media. But he also had a couple of throws that have gotten away from him, and a couple of decisions that he probably wished he could have had back. Like, there was a zone read play where he gave the ball away to the running back where he probably should have kept it. So with Anthony Richardson, you're still seeing the Anthony Richardson growing pains. You're seeing all of the issues that scouts had with him, but you also see a lot of the things that made Indianapolis fall in love with Anthony Richardson 4th overall. So he's just one of those players that is going to get better with time, repetition. He is competing with Gardner Minshew for the starting quarterback job, and right now him and Gardner Minshew are alternating first team reps. So one day Anthony Richardson will get the majority of the first team reps. The next day Gardner Minshew will get the majority of the first team reps. So they're just alternating day by day. So when Anthony Richardson returns to practice from this nose surgery that he received, he will get the majority of the first team reps that practice. Now, overall, Bryce Young being the best performing rookie quarterback doesn't really surprise me. This is kind of what we expected out of Bryce Young. He was better than CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, in my opinion, because of his ability to understand the game of football. How fast he's able to understand the playbook, understand protections, understand what defenses are trying to throw at him is why he has impressed so many people so far amongst the Carolina Panthers fan base. Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, those guys kind of having some growing pains, being up and down so far throughout training camp. You kind of expected that, even though I didn't expect it as much from CJ Stroud as I did Anthony Richardson. I didn't think that CJ Stroud would start this slow out the gate. And I think the Houston Texans having a defensive-minded coach may be the reason for that, because Frank Wright is an offensive-minded coach. And Bryce Young has already mastered the playbook pretty much. He's earned the respect of his teammates. And he already has become the starting QB of Carolina fairly quickly. So Frank Wright say, why waste the time? Why waste the meaningful reps? If Bryce Young is our guy, then we need to go ahead and make sure he's getting all of the first team reps necessary so he can build better timing with his receivers and teammates around him. Minnesota Vikings outlook for the 2023 NFL season. How good are the Minnesota Vikings going to be this year? Now, last season, the Minnesota Vikings were what a lot of people called a fluky team. They got all these wins due to all of these last minute fourth quarter comebacks. We all can't forget the miraculous comeback against the Indianapolis Colts on Christmas. It was a Christmas miracle for all Minnesota Vikings fans to behold. And then they won the NFC North division. And then they go into the playoffs and they lost to Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. Now, going into 2023, the biggest question for the Minnesota Vikings is this defense. Now, they got a new defensive coordinator in Brian Flores. Now, Brian Flores is one of the most respected coaches in all of the NFL. Not only is he a really good defensive mind, but he also is a really good coach. And in Mike Tomlin's words, when Brian Flores was released by the Miami Dolphins and he was available to get scooped up and be added to his coaching staff, Mike Tomlin went up to the owner's room really fast when it happened and said, hey man, can we get Brian Flores? And he said, hell yeah, man. And Coach Tomlin said, we got the chance to get a really good football coach. So Mike Tomlin loved having Coach Flores on his staff. And we're going to see how Brian Flores is going to be able to improve this Minnesota Vikings defense, because many Minnesota fans are optimistic about this defense being able to improve under Brian Flores. But you don't know how much of a improvement it's going to be from what you had on that side of the football last year. So this defense will be better, but it's one of those cases, how better? Because this defense was really bad, especially when it came to situations when the game was on the line. They always folded the majority of the time. And when you look at Brian Flores, something that he loves to do compared more to the other defensive coordinator is that he's way more aggressive. A lot of blitzes, a lot of cover 0, cover 1. And do you have the kind of players that fit what Brian Flores wants to do defensively is the question that you're asking if you're a Vikings fan going into the 2023 season. So that's why Vikings fans, most of them, are optimistic about what Brian Flores is going to be able to bring to this defense. This defense, they do expect to improve, but they don't know if this is going to be a defense that goes from where they were last year to being one of the best in the NFL. So they probably will make some leaps and improvement on defense, but they won't make a lot of strides on defense. Now, there are a couple of guys who fit Brian Flores' defense pretty well in the secondary, which is a huge concern that everybody has about Minnesota. Their secondary was not good at all. Anytime old man Patrick Peterson is the best player that you have at cornerback, you got an issue. And I love Patrick Peterson. He plays for my Steelers, but he was getting carved up by Isaiah Hodgins. Not once, but twice. Let's not forget that, people. But he's gone now. You brought in Byron Murphy in free agency. You also signed edge rusher Marcus Davenport. Now, when you look at Byron Murphy, I felt like he was really underrated during his time with the Arizona Cardinals. He's a really good slot cornerback. So I think one of those three cornerback spots, you already have a good idea who's going to have one of them already secured. Now, who are going to be your two outside cornerbacks? Rookie Mekhi Blackman. Now, he was a mid-round pick out of USC, but he's really aggressive, really physical, really good in press man-to-man coverage. So I think this is one of those guys that you could see being a rookie starter for Brian Flores in this defense. Like I said, really aggressive, really physical cornerback, good in man-to-man press coverage. So that's what Brian Flores wants out of his cornerbacks. And I think that he's also pretty solid against the run. Now, Andrew Booth, he was a rookie last season, really athletic, had a lot of upside, but was really up and down. Are you going to give him another trial run this season? I guess we'll see. Now, Lewis Cine, majority of his rookie season, he missed, but coming out of Georgia, this dude was highly praised, super aggressive, very good tackler. He's just the player who just throws his body around. Then Brian Flores should have a lot of fun having Lewis Cine on his defense. Now, you still do have Harrison Smith and Danielle Hunters, who are still staples of your defense. Harrison Smith, he isn't what he used to be, but he's still highly productive, still one of the best at the position. So overall, when I'm looking at this defense, I mean, I don't think this defense is going to be as bad as what some people may think. It definitely won't be as bad as what it was last year. They're definitely going to be way more aggressive. They're going to take way more risk. But with Brian Flores' defense, you know that there's going to be some situations where you're going to take some gambles and they're not going to pay off, and you're going to take some risk and they're going to pay off well. So defensively, I'm a little bit higher on the Vikings than what most people are. I think this defense should be top 17, top 18. Now, looking at this offensive line isn't bad, but I have my reservations about it. Watching the quarterback Netflix documentary series, Kirk Cousins was getting thrown around back there like a rag doll. And the way this offensive line played during that documentary series made me feel really bad for Kirk Cousins. So this offensive line, I want to see if they're going to improve this season. They weren't bad last year, but hopefully they can take a step up in pass protection this season. You lose Dalvin Cook. You got rid of him. You cut him. But I don't really think there's going to be a huge drop-off at running back with Alexander Mattison finally taking over. If you play Madden, you know how much of a stud Alexander Mattison is on your Madden franchise. But in real life, he's that dude as well. And the difference between him and Dalvin Cook is that Dalvin Cook is way faster, way more agile, better in space. But Alexander Mattison is a true power back. He has really good speed, really good size, and plus he's really good after contact. This is one of those guys that every time he gets the football, you're going to hear some pads thumping. You're going to hear a lot of pads thumping and clapping. There's going to be a lot of violence every single time he totes the rock. And you got to remember that Alexander Mattison is somebody who averages over 4 yards per carry, and he has really good hands. Now, his hands aren't as good as Dalvin's, but he isn't too shabby in that department as well. So I'm thinking that Alexander Mattison should be in store for a breakout season this year. Kirk Cousins, after watching the Netflix documentary about him, I'm a bigger supporter of him now than what I was prior to watching that. And to be honest, I was never really a big Kirk Cousins guy prior to QB. But after watching that, I got a lot of admiration for how he plays through injuries, how he also finds ways to take care and give the family the time that they deserve and need from him throughout the season. And I just like how even sometimes he can kind of be a little bit low on himself. He is one of those QBs that does rise to the occasion more times than what people give him credit for. So I'm kind of feeling like Kirk Cousins is a little bit underrated. I think he's like the 11th best quarterback going into this season, honestly. And this offense, you got Jordan Addison, who should be an upgrade from Adam Thielen. I'm thinking that Jordan Addison is going to have a really good rookie season. Really good route runner, really good acceleration. He wasn't as great as an athlete that some people thought he was when he tested at the combine. But, I mean, when you watch him on film, you see somebody who's just a really good receiver. Very, very good ball control. I think he has really good hands. Like, I think that Jordan Addison, you could easily have made the case for him being the number one wide receiver coming out. And some people may have had him as the number one wide out, but you got him and Jay Jettas on the opposite side. And these rookie wide receivers, they kind of start to come out hitting the ground running out the gate. So Jordan Addison has been as good or is as good as some of the other rookie wideouts that have been drafted in the first round in the past, like him. Then this could be a really nasty passing attack the Vikings could have this season, because I kind of forgot they got TJ Hawkinson at tight end as well, who they got at the trade deadline from the Minnesota Vikings, and he was a pretty big addition to that offense when they got him. So looking at this offense shouldn't drop off. Your biggest question is, how are they going to look defensively? This defense is going to improve, but how much is the question. So my thoughts on Minnesota overall going into this season is that I think they are one of those teams that they're a borderline playoff team. And I don't feel that way because of how last season went and how they won the majority of their games. I just feel that way because their defense, you don't know about it. Their offensive line is a little and Kirk Cousins at times can be but that's sometimes. And overall, when I look at them, I just get 9-8. And that's kind of the record prediction that I have for them. I think they can be around 9, 10, 11 wins at most this year. But I don't think they're going to have the kind of season that they had last year. Their schedule is way tougher. And this division is also going to be a little bit more difficult this season compared to 2022. But let me know your thoughts on the Minnesota Vikings going into this season. How good do you think they're going to be? And what are you feeling about Kirk Cousins being in the Netflix quarterback documentary series? What are your thoughts on him? Most of us expect the Florida Gators to struggle this upcoming college football season. And then if the Vegas odds end up turning out to be right, and this team only wins 5 games or less, will this fan base turn on Billy Naiper? Now, the reason why I'm asking this is because a lot of Florida fans right now, if you ask them how they feel about Billy Naiper, they're going to tell you, man, I got a lot of confidence in Billy, man. He's killing it on the recruiting trail. I think the Florida Gators football program is headed in the right direction. Now, this is before we start getting to playing the games in the regular season. And when we start playing these games and Florida starts having a couple of ugly losses, maybe they get blown out week 1 against Utah on the road, Maybe they end up getting blown out by Tennessee. Let's say they got a couple of ugly losses and they end up having the season start out how most people expected it to start. How were Gators fans going to start to feel about Billy Napier then? Because it's easy to be optimistic before the season starts because you haven't played the game. The most important thing to determining a head coach's future success is results. And if Billy Napier and Florida don't make it to a bowl game, are Florida fans still going to be feeling incredibly optimistic about the future? Because there are really a good amount of Florida Gators fans who kind of question the Billy Napier hiring to begin with. There's already a good amount of skepticism when teams make hires and they bring in G5 coaches. And you look at Mike Norvell, what was the narrative about him around this time last year? People were on the fence about him. People didn't have a lot of faith about Mike Norvell going into the 2022 college football season. Be honest. And for the Florida State Seminoles fans who are watching this, you're going to agree. You didn't have a lot of confidence in Mike Norvell. And if Florida ends up struggling and Billy Napier's year 2 looks a lot like Mike Norvell's year 2, I think that Florida Gators fans are going to turn on him incredibly fast. Gators fans are not a patient fan base. This fan base isn't FSU or Miami because this isn't a program that's been down as bad as what the Hurricanes and Seminoles have been over the last couple of years. Now, they've been bad, but let's not act like Florida hasn't been to a couple of New Year's Six bowl game appearances. As bad as people try to make Dan Mullen out to be, he took Florida to 2 New Year's Six bowl games, an SEC championship. So their down years haven't been as bad as Miami and FSU. So Billy Napier, it would be a little bit uncomfortable for him. But I still think that if you're a Gators fan, you should have a lot of faith in Billy Napier, regardless for how this season turns out. Billy Napier, he's proven to you that he's a good recruiter. You got a great recruiting class right now. He's making it rain in recruiting. So for Florida, this is one of those seasons that you got to go into with the expectations that it's a rebuilding year. So if you don't make it to a bowl game and people come at you sideways and say, man, y'all suck, y'all wasn't good this season, you can say it was a rebuilding year. Watch what we do this season. Graham Mertz is a large reason why most people don't have a lot of confidence in the Florida Gators being able to be bowl eligible this year. They got a really tough schedule. And even though they are going to have some games that they're going to have a good chance at being able to pull the upsets up in, or being able to come up with the upsets in, this is still a squad that needs a lot of things to go right in those games. And they need more things to go right for them than they do the other team. They probably do need some breaks in there, and they're going to need some massive performances to pull off some massive upsets. Now, they do have one of the best rushing attacks in all of college football. Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, that running back, is one of the best running back duos in America. They should have a really good offensive line despite losing a couple of starters to the NFL. And you got a new defensive coordinator, so your defense, there's a lot of optimism about how it will look this year. And hopefully it can improve, because I don't think your defense can go any lower than what it was in 2022. So for the Florida Gators, even if this season goes bad and the Gators are as bad as advertised, and this team is what we thought, most of us, well, at least the Gators play like how most of us thought they would, I still have a lot of confidence in Billy Napier. And if you're a Gators fan, that confidence really shouldn't change. And this is why I'm kind of talking about this issue, because I already know when the season starts in Florida, if they end up struggling, how the fan base could probably turn on him. And Florida fans aren't the most patient of people, or they aren't the most patient of people. And we already remember how fast FSU fans were ready to throw out Mike Norvell. So if Billy Napier and Florida struggle in 2023, I think this fan base is going to be incredibly impatient with him. And I think that a good amount of Gator fans out there and Swamp Nation are probably going to be ready to throw the hot seat talk with Billy Napier. And the thing with me is that the reason why I got so much belief in Billy Napier is that even though we got the transfer portal and NIL and it's so quick to be able to build a program up from scratch, I still think with Billy Napier, he's going to choose the long-term approach, which is building a program up through recruiting, only using a transfer portal when you got dire needs to address. And with him, I trust his process. I watched him a lot when he was coaching at Louisiana with Levi Lewis and Elijah Mitchell at running back. So I do have a little bit of bias towards Billy Napier when I assess him as a head coach. But I think with Florida, it took them a while to get things settled. It took him a while to get everything in order. And I think this season things are a little bit rough because I don't think everything that he hoped happened in the transfer portal went his way. Obviously, we know what went wrong with the Jalen Rashada situation. And then you had the Grayson McCall situation where everybody speculated that Grayson McCall was a lock for Florida, and then he isn't eligible due to grades, so he has to go back to Coastal. But my confidence in Billy Napier, though, is still really high. And I'm really judging him based on what he does in year 3 at Florida. I never really expected Florida to win 9-8 games last season. I kind of expected them to be what they were last year with Anthony Richardson. This season, I'm not really expecting too much. And maybe it's because my expectations are low, but there are Florida fans out here, and there are going to be some that comment in the comment section and say, man, we're going to win at least 8-9 games this year. You see, those are the kind of fans that I'm talking about that are going to be ready to throw Billy Napier to the wolves or put him on the hot seat when things get a little bit rocky. So, are Florida fans going to continue to have the same amount of faith in Billy Napier that they have now the next couple of months if things start to go a little bit wrong or a little bit left for the Florida Gators football program? There's still going to be a lot of optimism around Billy Napier and the direction of the Florida Gators football program. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. This is the last episode that we're doing of JT Sports Live with this microphone. This Samson G-Shock Pro or Samson G-Track Pro has been a staple of the JT Sports Podcast, and it has been the microphone that we've used for every single episode, every single segment of this podcast since 2020, when we really started taking this thing seriously full time, and it's about to be no longer. Now, we're still going to use it if we have some guest episodes that we do in person, but I got a new microphone coming in. I ordered it a couple of hours ago. I got overnight shipping on it, and it should be here no later than 11 a.m. tomorrow. I'm really excited about it, so I'm looking forward to using that new microphone. Looking forward to some new crisp audio. And I apologize for having the show so late today. I was still trying to get a lot of things in order. And to be honest with you, the show probably is about to change times. I don't know if it's still going to be going at 5. It may go a little bit earlier, a little bit later, because I'm about to start my senior year of college. And, you know, me being back in school, having to attend more classes in person in the fall semester than what I did during the spring, I'm probably going to have to change the live streaming schedule. So we might have to start live streaming a little bit later or a little bit earlier, but I'll let y'all know about that as we get closer. The season is just around the corner, man. We're getting into the NFL Preseason Hall of Fame game. We just touched on it in today's episode. We're going to be touching on some Week 1 college football matchups, giving my early thoughts on those. If you haven't already, make sure that you are subscribed to the JT Sports Podcast. We got a lot of great content on the way. like the video, subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Remember that we're not just available on YouTube. You can find us on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast, and I will see you guys tomorrow